All right. So thank you all so much and welcome to our seminar today, our Unexpected Paths Career Speaker Series. I am so excited that you are all here. And let me introduce myself. My name is Dr. Lauren Hopkins, and I reside in Columbia, South Carolina. I am a social worker and a curriculum developer and a program evaluator and trainer. I do a lot. And so if you're interested in what all I do, I encourage you to check out the recording from our March seminar where I went into all that. But I am so excited about today. We have a special guest on the line, and we have Yvette Tyndale. And so Yvette is actually a social worker, a licensed clinical social worker in Connecticut, I believe. And so, yeah, okay. And I actually met Yvette through networking, and she shared with me her experience with a fellowship that she participated in a social work fellowship at Yale University after she got her master's. And I said, oh my goodness, this is great information. And I am very passionate about field education, very passionate about internships and helping people to get the experience that they would like or that they need to be successful in their roles. And so when I met Yvette, I just gravitated to her. I said, oh my goodness, I would love for you to be a speaker on the Unexpected Path series. Okay, and so let's go ahead and this will be a Q&A session. So if you do have any questions for Yvette, I will be asking some questions, but feel free to put it in the chat. I will be monitoring it. Also, I will give you some time at the end to unmute and ask Yvette some questions. And so we will go ahead and get started. Hey, Yvette, how are you?
Hi everyone. I'm doing fine. I'm happy to be here. Thank you again for having me.
Oh, yes, you are very welcome. And so if you don't mind, go ahead and tell us a little bit about your background, your educational background, and we'll just start from there.
Okay. So, as you mentioned, I'm a licensed clinical social worker. I actually started my education down at USC, go Gamecocks. So I did my undergrad at USC and got my bachelor's in experimental psych, and then took a year off. I was broke, like most college students, needed to kind of work and just kind of figure some things out. And then that very next year, I went back and got my master's in social work. And then about 3 years later, I pursued a social work fellowship at Yale. This was an advanced clinical social work fellowship, and I'll talk a little bit more about that later. At the time, the fellowship was a 1 year program, and now it's actually a 2 year. So I'll share a little bit about that later. And here I am, kind of fast forward, here I am. So I was a fellow at Yale from 2017 until 2018. And
Oh,
now I work, or continue to work in clinical practice.
oh, that's great. That's awesome. So let me ask you, if you have your bachelor's in advanced psychology, you said?
Experimental psych, really
Experimental.
just psychology.
Psychology.
It's
Okay.
just, different schools call it different things,
I
really. So.
gotcha. I gotcha. Well, if you don't mind sharing, what encouraged you or inspired you to pursue a MSW?
So I have always been drawn to serving others. And I always like to say social work chose me because in my mind, I was going to be a nurse and was actually pursuing that for a short period of time and quickly saw, oh, goodness, no, this is not for me, right? Loved the nursing classes. But the science just, it was not my thing. I was bored. It wasn't captivating. It wasn't for me. Um, and I thought about it and spoke with many advisors and kind of talked about the things that I like to do, and noticed that I always gravitated towards those roles, but never really put two and two together like, oh, you should go into social work. And like many people, I didn't know a lot about what social workers do, right? We kind of, the stereotypical way that people think of social workers, right? We think of, child services. I didn't actually think a lot about therapy. I didn't know many
Mm,
social workers were therapists.
right.
Um, and so, with speaking with advisors, um, that was kind of when I learned a little bit more about social work and started to look into it and realize like, oh wow, this is who I've been all along. It's really just like getting to work and do the things that I love every day. So that's kind of how I got into social work.
Wow, that's amazing. I feel like
Mhm.
oftentimes, especially for me and other individuals that I speak to, it's sort of embedded in us, the desire to help other people. And we realize that we've been doing it all along and we may not know what to call it. But we sort of fall into sort of social work, or it's just natural for us to want to help others. So that's amazing. So let me ask you, during that, because you did state that you sort of took a year off in between your in some time. So that gap year, if you don't mind me asking, what did you do within that time? Did you do a social work role or something outside of social work?
So I worked and I worked and I worked and I worked. um, so I was actually working at a disability board, and I was actually in direct practice. So, and I always say that my favorite roles were my roles early on, because this was like in the trenches, right? This was, I probably worked just about every shift you can imagine: first, second, third, swing, split, you name it. But it was where I got to see, like, oh, wow, people really need services, right? People need mental health services. People need behavioral health services. People need disability services. Where I was initially was at a disability board and I worked in a home with women and men who it's more of, I guess would be ideal to like residential treatment, but these clients lived in the community. And so they started out in the trenches, right? Preparing meals and administering medication and transporting individuals to places in the community, advocating for them. That direct practice. So kind of like a mixture of, um, kind of helping with those basic needs and kind of advocating, helping people gain skills. Right? These were clients who maybe didn't know how to count money, or,
Mm-hmm.
didn't know how to write their names, or, those type of things, maybe lack some social skills. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
and this was, their home. This was their life. This is where they lived.
Right.
So that's kind of where I started, and actually did that up until I went back to school.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah,
Awesome.
tell you.
That's great. You really got, it seems like you got a really strong foundation within that year. And it's really a blessing that you were able to stay within that field, within the social
Mhm.
work field. And so that is great. Now, let me ask you, what inspired you to, well, how did you find the role, the fellowship role? Or why did you look for it, or tell, if you could tell us about
Yep.
that, that'd be great.
Yep. So I graduated from USC in 2014, and I actually applied twice for the fellowship. So
Oh,
when I initially, so you're eligible for the fellowship when you're getting ready to graduate. So you would apply, let's say I graduate in May of 2021, I would apply by January of
wow.
2021. If that makes sense.
Mhm.
So when you graduate, then you go on to the fellowship program. And I remember thinking, okay, I've gathered these skills, I've done, like, the textbook work, the academic part, but I need more, right? Like, I know I want to go into clinical social work. I had 2 field placements. I didn't feel like it was enough.
Mm,
Right. So I had 2 field placements. Uh, they were like maybe twice a week.
mhm,
Um, for 2 semesters each
Right.
because I wasn't advanced standing because I didn't have the BSW. And
Right.
I just felt like I needed more.
Mm.
And that feeling actually never left me. So I initially started looking, like, what else is out there? Like, this the whole, when you graduate from college, everybody tells you to do what? You go get a job, right? That's what everybody tells, right? You graduate and you go get a job, you go and you work.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but I just remember thinking that I need more. And so I started looking. And at the time, I was already a member of NASW,
Mm-hmm.
which I really encourage and can talk a little bit more about later. Um, but they're on their website, they have like a job center and they post. And that was how I found the fellowship. So
Mm-hmm.
I applied for it. And initially, once I graduated from USC, I didn't have much clinical experience. So
Mm-hmm.
outside of, my field placements, I worked I guess a non-social work job to kind of, help me through
Yeah.
when I was in school. And it really was about survival, right? And so then when I graduated, it's like, oh wow, I need more. I feel like I'm not where I'm
Mm.
not comfortable with where I am.
Right. Right.
And actually had already because I think they still do this. They let you sit for your exam before you graduate, right? So here
Yeah.
I am. I come out. I'm licensed, and I just didn't feel quite ready.
Mm.
But I actually did not get an interview the first time around.
Okay.
So because I had already, found it on the NASW job site,
Mm.
I already knew about the fellowship.
Got.
So the I actually my when I graduated with my MSW, I began working at the Department of Juvenile Justice in Columbia, South Carolina. It is
Mm.
by far probably the best job I've had. I served as a community social worker, and it was just I felt so free in a way. Like I felt like there were so many things I could do. I, developed a like a devised a group plan and went down to an alternative school and kind of pitched a group proposal and got
Mhm.
it, and was able to put some groups in an alternative school.
That's awesome.
um yep. And but also still got to experience like the clinical side, right? Because I still worked with children and adolescents, and my main goal or main role was to prevent children from actually being involved with the Department of Juvenile Justice.
Gotcha.
And so still got that community piece, still got that direct piece, still got the groups piece. I actually had an intern. So just a
Yes.
it's hard to
Mhm.
find that. It is hard to find a place where you can get all of that. So
Mhm.
despite that, I still felt like I needed more.
Mm.
So 3 years later, I said, you know what? I'm going to give it another shot. And I reapplied for the fellowship. And then I actually landed an interview. And then I'll talk about that too. It's a long process. Uh,
Wow.
and then pursue the fellowship. So just that feeling of just wanting more, wanting to be
Mm.
trained more. I wanted more of didactic teachings, and I wanted not only clinical supervision but reflective supervision,
Right.
and I wanted to be a leader. I
Mhm.
wanted to learn, how do I lead? How do I grow not only as a person but as a professional? How do I
Mm.
help lead other people who are interested in maybe non-traditional roles? Or
Right.
we kind of go to school and we think we have to leave and we have to get a job. Like,
Right. Right. Hmm.
not many people know about fellowships, um,
Right.
or even just kind of know how to even go after it. So that
Hmm.
was one of my main reasons.
That's awesome. So Yvette, I something that I hear you saying is that you did not feel ready to go into, well, or that you wanted more, right? And
Yep.
so what would be your advice for individuals and other helping professionals, or really just professionals in general, that feel like they are not ready to say go into the workforce, or that they just need more? Like, what would be the difference in, say, doing a training as opposed to, getting a fellowship? Or if you could speak on that.
Yeah, yeah. So one thing I think is when we're in our field placements, right? Trying to go above and beyond, right? Hey, I'm interested in, I don't know, groups. I'm interested in group therapy, or I'm interested in supervision, right? Or I'm interested in, being an adjunct professor,
Mhm.
or learning how to, manage, having or have be a field instructor or be a field preceptor, because I started out being a field preceptor and
Mm,
then worked into being a field instructor. I'm really big on kind of taking the steps, right, versus just jumping right in. But
yes.
speaking up about it, reaching out to people, letting them know what you're interested in. I find that sometimes in social work, it's kind of, you know you just stay in this box.
Mm,
But it's a really broad field, and there's a lot out there that we can do. See if you can find someone, connect with someone who may be doing the things that you're doing. Keep in touch with people from your school.
mm,
I remember reaching out to some professors saying, hey, I don't know if they still have the field instructor training
mhm.
over at USC, but I kept in touch with my previous field liaison and reached out, hey, I want to be trained. And so that's how I got
Yeah.
trained. So I really would encourage that. And one of the differences I think for me is like going into just a regular role versus going into a fellowship
Mm,
was just the level of training and supervision that
mm,
I received, and
mm.
the exposure that I had to trainings.
Right.
So I'll take, like, there are certain clinical approaches with the trainings that they're really hard to get into. They're limited. TFCBT, for example,
Mm,
that's, you have to be like picked to actually go in those trainings. When I was at DJJ, if that was something that I experienced, right? My role didn't quite fit for me to be for me to be eligible for those trainings.
mm. Okay.
Um, so certain things, I think it just really opens the door for certain trainings, certain experiences.
Mhm.
Um, so that is a really big thing that I think that really makes the difference. I think too, for work, you get really caught up in your role at work, right? This is what
Mhm.
you do, this is what you have to do. And then we find that there's not much room or space or
Mm.
exposure to other things that we may be interested in.
Right, right. I agree. I know that I had some experiences in the past where I wanted to get training. And also, I actually had a supervisor one time who was not a helping professional. He didn't know anything about social work, counseling, or whatnot. And so I said, hey, I need this training. I was actually the only social worker at the agency. And they were very open to it. They actually had funding available for trainings, but sometimes you just have to just ask and take that leap of faith and then see where that goes. Um,
Absolutely.
so let me ask you about your fellowship. So if you can tell us a little bit about that. One, what is a fellowship for those that, because we may be more familiar with internships, but what is a fellowship?
So, fellowship for social work, anyway, is typically a post grad program where you have the opportunity to gain more skills. And for mine was clinical, but not all of them are. So, for example, I think there's one in North Carolina. I don't know if they still have that one, but that one was actually for people who wanted to go into nonprofit management.
Oh, wow.
And yep, so they have, I don't know if they still have that one, but I believe that one was based out of North Carolina. Harvard, they actually have a a post MSW fellowship as well, and it's more medical, related to pediatric social work. I believe it's through the Center of Palliative Care.
Mm,
University of Massachusetts, Amherst, they actually have one. That one is actually focused more on like cultural competency, diversity, education and training. So there are there. I was going to say quite a few, but that's not true. There are social work fellowships are actually limited for social work anyway. But there are some that are out there. But these are just programs where you typically, as a post grad, you are able to gain more experience, more typically supervision, consultation, training. Um, I know one of my favorite was rounds, just being able to collaborate with other professionals.
Yes.
Um, so that's more of what a fellowship is in
Yeah.
social work.
Oh, that's awesome. Now, your fellowship, was it full time or part time?
Full time. So I have yet to see a fellowship that's part time. So
Okay.
typically they're and they may be, but I haven't seen one. Even the VA has one, but it's full time. Um, I've only seen full time ones,
Okay.
and typically you have a stipend.
Okay.
Um, some of them are a little more generous than others. um,
Those are nice.
yeah, yeah. And I actually worked during my fellowship year. Um, for someone who doesn't have to, that's great. I could not afford to live off of the stipend only, especially because I was making the move from South Carolina to Connecticut, and
Mm,
you guys know where Connecticut is. It's way up, way up north. So the cost of living
right.
was just very different. So I actually worked through my fellowship as well.
Gotcha. Oh, that's awesome. That's
Mm.
awesome. So let me ask, so a day in the life of, and we can speak about you as a fellow, what would be a typical day for you for individuals who may be interested in something like this?
Okay. So I'll talk about I can only speak about the specific fellowship that I had. So I was a fellow at Yale. And this was through the Child Study Center department. And my particular fellowship was in the ICAPS program. And ICAPS is the intensive in-home child and adolescent psychiatric service. So you can see why they call it ICAPS, right? No one's saying that over and over. So um, my program was in-home, and as a fellow, we carried 6 cases. And that may sound very low, but remember it's intensive. So you are required to, if you're going to actually like pursue the model with fidelity, you would see your families at least 3 times a week. And this, I think it's important for me to say too, that this program, you actually work with a partner.
Okay.
Yep. So you have a partner. So it's 2 clinicians, and typically you have a family. So usually you'll have, like I said, 3 sessions a week: one with the child, one with the parent or parents, and then one with the family. So that would make your 3 sessions a week. And
Okay.
this program aimed to decrease hospitalization for children and adolescents who had psychiatric challenges.
Mm,
So I could say psychiatric and or substance use, but typically psychiatric challenges. There are other programs that focus more on the substance use.
mm.
So that was the program that I went into for my fellowship. We are probably, those of us from the South are probably not familiar with ICAPS. I had never heard of it until until I came to Yale, and that's actually where the model was developed. So
That's awesome. So let me ask, and I know I'm backtracking a little bit, and I apologize about that. So, but I'm very interested just in this whole process. I really feel like if I had thought about a fellowship, this actually sounds like something that I would have been
it
interested in.
was.
Yeah, it really
Yeah, and they're
is.
different ones. They're different ones. There's actually so my program was in home, and then there were actually outpatient ones too. And
Mm.
so it's interesting because I pursued the in-home program for my fellowship. When I graduated from my fellowship, I got hired on at the Child Study Center, but in the outpatient clinic. I pursued the outpatient track. So I feel like I kind of got the best of both worlds.
Yes, yes.
And I don't think I answered your question about the day in the life of a fellow.
Okay, go
Uh,
ahead.
but so typically so you have, grand rounds. We also would have like clinical rounds where you would typically collaborate with other clinicians, have like a team, and the psychiatrist. You would see your families, you would do your paperwork. So like your typical, you feel like a typical social worker,
Right.
um, but with some extra, because
Mhm.
there were also just other trainings and other responsibilities that we had as fellows.
Right, right. Oh, that's awesome. So, how do you feel like, okay, two questions. What lessons did you learn during that fellowship, and how did those lessons help you to how did those lessons help you in your future?
Mhm. So one, I think probably the biggest lesson that I've learned um, is to just believe in myself, and step outside of my comfort zone, try new things. I had never been to Yale or been to Connecticut,
Mm,
prior to the fellowship, and quite honestly, didn't imagine myself being there. So for one, it's different, right? It's an institution and it's Ivy League, and so
right,
um, there's a culture there that um, that will take some adjusting. So
right.
that's one thing. So I think for me, stepping outside of my comfort zone and just recognizing like, okay, you're here and you're here for a reason. Like,
Mhm.
right, use it. Right, it's not forever. It's a time limited. It's a fellowship. They're
Right.
time limited. Um,
Mhm.
and so one of the biggest things that I learned is that like, oh wow, I can be a leader, right,
Mhm.
and a learner at the same time. So I
Mhm.
think too, like that was one of the biggest things I learned is that I love to learn. I love to learn new things. And I also like to lead, right? We all have something to give. We all have something to bring to the table.
Yeah.
Um, and so I kind of take that with me, and I'm actually still involved with the fellowship program. Now I serve on the social work, the fellowship advisory board. So now I'm a part of, yep, recruiting, and we just recently selected our new fellows. The program has changed some since I was a fellow, but that's what
Mhm.
you want, right? You want change.
Yeah.
So.
Oh, that's
Mhm.
awesome. And that's great. Did you apply for that advisory board, or did they ask you to participate?
It was an opportunity that presented itself, and I'm grateful for
Oh,
that.
that's awesome. And I will say, we do have a message from Ty, and she said, I can be a leader and a learner at the same time, and then put a heart. That's amazing. And I feel like we have to remember that, like, it's okay not to know everything, and it's okay to
Mhm,
ask and to learn, but also to lead. I was speaking with one of my mentees earlier, or a couple weeks ago, and I was saying that, okay, it may be time to. She was speaking about just elevating and in her career, and I was saying it may be time to just step out of your comfort zone and just to try something new, and you never know where that takes you, but someone may see, or someone will, let me say, see your value,
mhm,
and we never know who can coach us along the way. Also, that will give us that energy and that time and that patience, so we can grow into a dynamic helping professional, or whatever your career path is.
mhm.
So yes. So let me ask, as far as, so now you're on the advisory board. So with the on the advisory board, I know you have more information about the process now for fellowships. If you can speak a little bit about that, that would be
Mhm.
great. And then you can speak about your own experience too.
Yeah. So one thing I also want to give the fellowship, the advisory committee, some credit for is keeping or doing their best to keep fellows involved in the process
Mm.
of recruitment and interviewing. So as a fellow, we actually participated in interviewing new fellows coming in. So
Oh,
that was actually part of the process, part of, kind of gaining some leadership skills, gaining interviewing skills, So that's one thing, and that is something that we continue to maintain now. So that's one thing. And so a little bit about the process. So just like any other application process, right? They, would like your resume, your transcripts. There's a personal statement piece. There's a de-identified clinical narrative piece as well.
Okay.
References. Typically, we ask for three. I always like to tell people, when you're applying for something, and especially when it comes to, very prestigious fellowships, you do what you're asked. Like, do
Yeah.
what give them what they ask for. Right now, it's not the time to try to, oh, they asked for three, I'm going to submit five, right? Like, no,
Mhm.
they asked for three, give them three. We
Gotcha.
only read three, right?
Mm.
So I just want to just kind of emphasize that because, when you're applying for something, especially, something very competitive, um, they want the best of the best.
Right.
And I think it's also important to say that typically everybody's great. Let's say we get 100 applications, we read 100 applications, and everybody's great. We always like to say like, wow, we could pick anybody and they could come, right? But when you get down to the nitty gritty and you start reading and exploring, those things really matter. So um, that's kind of what the application process looks like. There's a hard deadline, like many other application processes. It's a
Mhm.
hard deadline. If it's not submitted on time, they won't even
Yes.
look at it. Um, I don't know. Am I supposed to talk a little bit about the interview process?
Sure.
Yep. So it's changed some. Obviously, it's different because of COVID. So we actually interviewed virtually this year.
Mhm.
And that is something that we are considering moving forward because, as you can imagine, they get applicants from all over the world.
Mhm.
Um, I always have this, uh, the word I'm looking for, but this feeling when I'm reading applications because I always think about my own, right? Like
Mhm.
somebody sat in the seat and was reading mine, and I wonder if I, did what I, was supposed to do, right, and only gave
Right.
what they asked for. So it's always an interesting feeling to be on the other side.
Mhm.
But the interview process was all day, literally. So you start at about, I think well, it's changed now, but I remember starting at about 8:39ish and going to close to 5. And I think I had about six different, I'm trying to remember. I think I had, it's hard for me to remember now. It's such a blur, especially with COVID. I hardly remember anything now. But I remember you kind of rotate. So
Gotcha.
you may be in, your first interview may be with, three people, and then you have like a schedule and you kind of rotate to each group. And
Mhm.
by the end of the day, you may have been interviewed by like 20 people.
Wow.
Yeah. So it's pretty intense. It's pretty intense.
Mhm. Wow. So, let me ask you, what are you currently doing within your job role, and how did your fellowship experience help you to strengthen and build your confidence in your current role?
So um, one of the I think the biggest takeaways for me from the program was I developed as I don't want to say a public speaker, but as a presenter, I should say
Mm.
that. So I, started to like contribute to social work in a different way, and more as a leader, more as an educator. And I actually actually submitted my we have a group we had a group or have they still have it a group project, and you have to do a presentation. It's called your end of the year presentation,
Mm.
and I presented on the four agreements and social work ethics, and
Oh, wow.
was approached by my supervisor after I completed my presentation, who was also a member of, or still is a member of NASW,
Mm.
and recommended that I um, that I presented at one of the NASW regional meetings. So that for me was the start of something, right? I think you mentioned earlier, like someone can see something in you, and really kind of help cultivate and kind of really help you explore those skills. And so that was a big start for me. I honestly felt like I never really had anything that people were or did anything that people were really excited about,
Mm.
and didn't really know that I had that in myself. Didn't know, like, oh wow, I actually like presenting, and people found it engaging, and people found the material interesting, and people wanted to hear more about it. And so
Mm.
that was a big start for me, and that is something that I continue to do now. I serve, continue to serve on in excuse me, serve um, through NASW, or serve with NASW. And I chair my first committee now. I'm chair of the NASW Ethics Committee. Never chaired anything before in my life, before now.
Wow.
And now review applications for continuing ed units. So I think that was just one of the biggest things for me, is someone seeing that leader in me, right? I was
Mhm.
always the person, kind of learning from other people, and never really thought of myself as being on the other side.
Wow.
And so I continue to maintain those roles today. And prior to the fellowship, I was a member of NASW, but
Mhm.
wasn't as active,
Mhm.
wasn't leading on a committee. So I think that I really just explored my professional skills and developed, not only as a clinician, but as a leader, and an active learner.
Right, right. Oh, that is amazing. I love to see or to hear about the evolution of you professionally, and from your bachelor's to your master's to working within your role, and then just really just evolving as a professional. That's amazing. Um, I would love to open up the floor to for our guests. Any questions that you all have for Yvette? Feel free to put it in the chat, and to unmute your mic. And we'd love to hear from you. Does anyone have any questions? We'll see. And there might be some individuals who are typing, but I will go ahead and I do have some more questions too. So if you do have any questions, please go ahead and put it in the chat. Oh, we see that Ty said, "Amen." The belief and confidence will be a game changer. Yes, ma'am. It sure will. And so if you do have questions, feel free to go ahead and put them in the chat. But I do have a few other questions for you. Um, so let me ask, for individuals who may not be able to do a fellowship or may not be particularly interested, what do you think are some opportunities or some leadership opportunities that they may participate in with wherever they are?
So I think here I am with NASW again. So that's our membership organization, and I think that's a good start. Uh, we need people. We need people to be involved. I know not everyone. I don't think everyone on are social workers.
Right, right.
So if there are other memberships, organizations that you can be a part of, I would recommend that. I know I hear some people talk about like the cost and that type of thing. You
Mhm.
know, I always say with anything in life, you get what you put into it, right?
Mhm.
Education is very expensive,
Yeah,
um,
it is.
and when it comes to like being actively involved, it really makes all the difference.
Mhm.
So that is one thing that I recommend, or just finding things that you're interested in, finding things um, that you may um, things that you may have never even thought of, right? Like,
Mhm.
I don't know, maybe I don't know, there's a writing club or a reading club. I mean, just
Right.
anything. It doesn't have to necessarily be academic or
Oh,
be
yeah.
related to social work. Um, I used to be in a book club that I
Mhm.
really enjoyed, and it was a way for me to connect to other people and really build different skills. Sometimes I think you can also find opportunities in just some of your like informal things, like a book club, right? Maybe they need
Yes.
somebody to lead it. Maybe they need somebody. Maybe you can take turns leading the sessions, something like that. Um, if people are at agencies and have supervisors or colleagues or people that they know, I think I mentioned this earlier, who are involved in things that they want to be involved in or interested in things. I've even asked some people, hey, I'm interested in research. Can I come and observe? Can I,
Yes.
is there I'll file papers if I need to, you know what I mean?
Yes.
Like I could file some papers and at least get familiar with, maybe some of the terminology or get familiar with some of the processes.
Mm,
So that's something that I, recommend. I
that's
think I
great.
see a question here.
Yes, we do have a few. Let me scroll on up here. So the first one is from Tabitha, and she stated, what do you suggest for recent graduates in finding what they want to do in their career?
Okay. I would say just sitting down and just thinking about what do I like, right? What have I done? I'll be honest. So I was in medical social work for a little tiny bit of my life, and actually was also really glad. I have this thing about quitting, right? So I'm like, no, 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 you
Mm,
can't quit something, which obviously you can. But when I found out I got the fellowship, I was happy to put in my resignation, and I was doing medical social work on the side. But I quickly found nope, I don't want to do that. I like the hustle and bustle, and it just wasn't my type of speed.
mhm.
Um, so I would say thinking about what have I done, what have I been exposed to, because maybe you haven't been exposed to like can you find what you want to do if you've never been exposed to it. So looking at what's out there, maybe talking to other people, networking with other people, seeing if, like I said before, if you can come and shadow, or seeing if you can observe, or seeing how you can get involved, something like that. If you have at least an area where you think you want to go, or have been, try reaching out to those people. So, as a recent grad, I'm assuming would have, some a field placement, maybe some professors. I have a professor who taught me my very first year of grad school, who I still maintain contact with today, who would still write references for me if I need it. So I think just really trying to like maintain those relationships and get yourself out there to see what's available.
Oh, I love that. And Tabitha did add that her intern is struggling with just figuring out what she wants to do. I thank you so much, Tabitha. And as far as keeping in contact with people, oh my goodness, that is so important. Now, it depends on, in my experience, let me just say, it depends on the relationship. Um, and so, but if you guys had a really good relationship, or and they know your work ethic, it does not hurt, and it might be pretty beneficial to reach out to them every 6 months. Say, hey, how you doing? Let me just give you an update on what's going on with me. As we strengthen our careers, we may need references. We may need to contact them and say, hey, I'm looking for something new. Have you heard of anything? Just reaching out every 6 months or every couple months or whatnot can make a big difference. So thank you so much, and thank you, Tabitha, for that and advocating for your intern. So that's awesome. And then we have another question that says, I don't want to assume that you had loans from graduate school, but if you did, were you able to put them on deferment/forbearance while you were in your fellowship?
Yes, and it's okay. If you are assuming, that's okay. I had them. Yes, I had student loans. Yep. So you can defer them if you need to. One of the things too I'll say is when you live off of a stipend, and depending on the amount of the stipend, it makes you eligible for things that you may not have been eligible for before. So for example, my stipend was not as generous as some other stipends. I'll just say that they are making some improvements and increasing the stipend over at Yale. But because my stipend was so low, I qualified for a very low payment. And so that way I was able to maintain my student loan forgiveness, still kind of be able to, make my monthly payments and still be in the program. Because deferment, there's a like a limited amount of time you can do that. But that is something that I did while I was making the transition to Yale, just because as you can imagine, how expensive it was to, make a move um, all the way to Connecticut, from South Carolina to Connecticut.
Yeah.
Um, but that's a really good question.
And I really applaud you for taking that leap of faith and going all the way to Connecticut. And she said, "Thank you for answering that." Yeah, that is from South Carolina. Are you from South Carolina?
Yep, yep, born and bred. So
Okay.
that is, yep, that is. I always say home is where the heart is.
Yeah.
So
Oh, that's awesome. So yeah, you took a leap of faith and going all the way up there and just taking a chance. I know I shared this during the last session, but I have moved not so much, all the way up north, but all over North Carolina and South Carolina, from the mountains to the beach. I am an advocate for just seeing what's out there. And if you're able to, some of us, have other obligations and children and families, but if you're able to, just go see what else is out there and spread your wings a bit. So awesome, awesome.
yeah. You bring up a good point too, because there are many people who actually apply for the fellowship. Some have families. Some people, even people in other countries, apply for the fellowship. And so that's why another reason why I think like connecting with other people is so important, because, right, I could help tell somebody like what type of living arrangements I made, right, or where I worked during the fellowship, because I'm sure that if I needed that, other people will too. So I think you bring up a really good point, just about like having support and being in different situations. It was definitely worth the sacrifice. I didn't know a soul, so I didn't know a single person when I came. It was scary. It was a bit scary. But what was more scary for me was like not feeding myself the way I need to be fed as it relates to my career, and kind of waking up every day and saying, oh goodness, I need more. I know that I can do more. I needed to be in an environment where I was exposed to different things, and where I could develop and evolve as a professional.
Mm. That is so powerful. Thank you so much. Do we have anyone that would like to go on off of to unmute themselves and ask a question before I ask the next one? Okay. Okay, just want to be sure. Now, I just have a few more questions for you. We just have a couple more minutes. Let me ask you, what goals are you currently working on?
So this is one of them. Just kind of being open to new opportunities. This is the first time that I have, ever participated in, sort of a Q&A, and it's, professional, but also personal, right? I'm sharing some, personal experiences, and just really kind of exposing myself and my vulnerability in a different way. So thank you again for this opportunity. So that's one thing. Another is I'm really, really involved in social work ethics. And one of my main goals right now is to increase visibility around social work ethics. Um, it is something that I'm learning that not many social workers talk about or really know about. Or if we know about it, we kind of know about it in this, kind of broad or general sense. And it's ours, right? It's our code of ethics. It was created for us, and we should know it regardless of where or how we practice. And It's just an area that I really like to kind of delve into and really kind of help social workers who are um, out in the trenches, right? We're kind of all out there. We have people on the here on in this meeting who are exploring what they want to do. How does social work ethics relate to that, right? Maybe they're interested in social work ethics. So I that's just kind of where one of my biggest goals right now um, kind of lie. So that and presenting. So really just kind of like, okay, all right, you've learned some things, you're continuing to evolve. How do you put all those things together um, and like bring it, make it, kind of bring it alive, I guess if I should say, right? So I'm no longer in the fellowship program. So how do I kind of take what I've learned and like bring those things alive, keep those things kind of moving and going?
Oh, that is amazing. That's amazing. Thank you so much. And I do have a final question for you. Well, one of two. What is a quote or saying that you live by? What is sort of like one of your mantras?
I have to say, probably a very common one, but it's trust the process, right? Because social work, especially clinical social work, there are a lot of us. There are a lot of us. I think I, shared earlier, right? There's a lot of clinical opportunities. We could easily just go to work, right? You could easily just go and find a job and, just like go to work. Um, but I want to learn and I want to grow and I want to be fulfilled in my role. And so what I've been realizing is that I'm the only one that can do that, right? No one else can really create that for me. I have to create that for myself. So it's trusting the process, right? The process of learning myself, learning what's out there, learning social work in a different kind of way. That's one of the things I love about the field. There's so much to learn and so much to get involved in. There are so many social workers doing amazing things, who have amazing stories to tell. One of my other volunteering involvement is so one of the former fellows who was in my social work cohort. I watched her literally build she has a honeybee project. It's called the Honeybee Project. And I literally watched that like evolve out of the social work fellowship. And it's yep. So it's actually um, I think they just recently got nonprofit status. So it's just amazing to just see that process from like, we're literally out here, with our little sheets of paper, writing things. And now it's like, there's a photographer and, there's someone managing the website. And I mean, it's beautiful. So just trusting the process, like I've witnessed it for other people, right? So like, how do I still believe in myself and be patient and willing to watch things manifest for me?
That is absolutely amazing. I think we always have to remind ourselves to just trust the process. Sometimes, we don't know what's going to happen, but
Mhm.
sometimes if we take that leap of faith, it all works out. It all works out. Well, I want to thank you, Yvette. This was absolutely amazing. Thank you so much. I really
Thank
appreciate
you.
it. Yes.
Thank
And
you, everyone.
oh, yes. And I do have, so is it okay if individuals reach out to you if they have questions?
Sure.
Oh, great, great. Well, I do have, let me go ahead and I will share my screen here. And give me just a sec. And I do have some contact information for you. So for everyone who is interested in reaching out to Yvette, here is her email address. Here is her LinkedIn. You can find her on there. Also, if you're interested in connecting with me, there's my information. Also, this will be, well, of course, it is recorded, but I am going to put it on our on the Prepare to Impact YouTube page, and so feel free to share that. It should be up by tomorrow. And for next week, or I'm sorry, next month, I want to go ahead and share our guest speaker. This is Joey. He is absolutely amazing. Joey is going to be sharing some information about embracing your story and your passion to help guide your career. He has an amazing story and is a social worker also. And, he's going to be sharing how he is using his experience to help shape and inspire other people. And so go ahead, if you don't mind putting that on your calendar, May 18th, 6:30 to 7:30, and it will be via Zoom. And if there is nothing else, I want to say, and let me stop sharing again. I want to say that this was absolutely great. Thank you everyone for tuning in. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out. And we have some folks saying that this was awesome. Thank you so much. And I pray that you all have a wonderful evening. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
You're welcome.